It's great to be with you this evening. I'm filming this at home. I'm going to go on up to the office later on, but I did want to prepare my remarks now. I recognize a very serious day in our country. It's been a serious week, and I know there's a lot of anxiety about all the things that are transpiring. And there are two things I want to have a special presentation about. One of those, just take a few minutes to talk to Jim St. John, who's a member of our church. Jim was, for many years, the fire chief for Vestavia Hills Fire Department, did a great job with that, and he's now working with the State Office of Emergency Preparedness. And I want to ask him about the vaccine rollout in the state of Alabama and where things stand. There's been some new information, and I wanted him to talk about that. He mentioned it at prayer breakfast this morning, and I thought it might be of interest to everyone to hear that. And then I'm going to take a few minutes and just talk about the challenge in front of our country right now, which is so sad and depressing. But I want to talk about what Christians need to do right now, at least a few things that might be helpful to you. And we will get through this time. It's not unusual for there to be hard times in a nation, and we're no exception to that. The first thing I want to do, though, is to say a word of thank you to everyone for the responses. You know, at this point, my announcement of retirement is the second most popular service we have had in the history of the church. We had 2,200 views on the Sunday that the pandemic began. Lots of people were looking for somewhere to turn and hear something. But as of yesterday, more than 1,800 people had viewed the service from Sunday. And I am grateful for many who have said that the message itself of the entire service, but also the announcement was helpful to them. And I want to thank everyone for their remarks. More than 400 people have commented on the Facebook page, my Facebook page, where it is posted, and all the way from one of my high school teachers and youth group sponsors and young people that have grown up in the churches, all of the churches where I've been, I think, except for maybe my first one, which was an open country church, and I'm not sure they have internet yet out there. But so many wonderful things. Young people telling you things that you said or did or something that helped them, and so much of it I forgot until they brought it up, because in the ministry you just move on. You go from one thing to the next, and you're not given much time to stop and reflect and comprehend that what you're doing is having much effect. You just feel that call and urgency to keep going. And I think we all who are in the ministry struggle with whether or not we've made a great difference to people, but it's always just so amazing to see what God has really done in people. My favorite one yesterday was from Elizabeth Bradley, who grew up here about the same time Katie did. It was part of our friend group that was always in the home with the Mathangani kids and others when Katie was young. And Elizabeth thanked me for baptizing her and for doing her wedding. And then she said, "I'll never forget when you comforted me when I fouled out of a basketball game when you were the basketball coach." And, we started a girls basketball team when Katie was still coming along, and that team was so much fun. It was lots of great young ladies, and we did our best. We didn't score a lot of points, but we hacked a lot of fouls. And Elizabeth fouled out of this game, and she felt very upset about it. And apparently, I consoled her in a way that she still remembered. And so I was grateful for that. But more than anything else, it has just been overwhelming to think of all the wonderful people that have been part of your life through the years, and hearing from those folks and receiving their blessings. And there will be much more of that up ahead. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank you already for so many wonderful things. We're in a lot of transition at the moment. We've bought a townhome 2 minutes from where we live now, and we've sold our house, and so we're in the middle of all that in addition to getting ready for retirement, but still doing the work here. We've got a couple months to go to the end of February, and so I'll be around and preaching, and um, then we will be living here, and so I'm sure we will be connecting with each other in days ahead. So thank you so much for your outpouring of love, and I know there's sadness that goes with this. It's both directions. We share that, and I share that. It's the greatest privilege in the world to be a pastor for people and to be pastor of a local church. And as I explained the other day, was not something I came to lightly. It took a long time to feel the peace that this is the direction, that there are new chapters in my life coming, and it's time to turn to those chapters. And it is not the end of life. It is a transition. It's really, retirement's not a very good word for it. It's transition from one phase of life to another. And I just want to thank you for the great, great privilege of being your pastor. And I'm just going to treasure every single minute from now to the end of this time. I've got 6 sermons to say to you what needs to be said, so I really am thinking a lot about those, and look forward to sharing them. But one thought that I have thought about is one that I'll pick up in a little while when I talk about our nation, and so we'll get back to that. Right now, I want to take a moment and bring on Jim St. John, and I want him to talk to us, and so we'll welcome him right now.
Hi, Gary.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Sounds like you've had a busy morning.
It has been. It certainly has been.
I know you guys are probably trying to get prepared for inauguration week and the threats and so forth that have been made. Do you feel able to share anything of encouragement to us about next week and what people should and shouldn't be concerned about?
I think that the general guidance before this, see something, say something, is really the only thing to share, because there's not a specific thing to be concerned about at this point that has been shared with me in any case. And so,
or there's more just kind of a general threat kind of thing out there, without necessarily anything concrete and credible at this point. But
that's it. Just keep your eyes open. If you see something that doesn't belong, call 911.
Okay.
That's really the only advice that I have to share.
Well, I want to take a moment this morning. Let me say to everyone at home that Jim shared a little bit this morning with prayer breakfast, and I thought this would be a great thing because everybody's been hearing about the vaccine and following the vaccine, but there's been a lot of chaos in the rollout, as inevitably probably was going to happen, because it's a to do something this massive that wasn't on the schedule is quite an undertaking. So I wonder if you could give people, and I've got a slide I'll put up at the end and let people see, but I'd like you to just kind of give them an update on where the vaccine process is and what they ought to do to make sure they are in a situation to get the vaccine.
Certainly, and thank you for the opportunity to share this with more than we had at the prayer breakfast this morning, because we get a lot of calls and there's a lot to gain from it. The process for registering, the slide that you'll be putting up has got the contact information. The most desirable way on there is the top way. For residents of Jefferson County, they can register for the vaccine by going online at the web address, and they'll see in that slide a screenshot, and there's a green button right in the middle that they can click on. There's just a few questions to answer, and that results in the same input as if they were to call the number, the Jefferson County number. And then that places them in the queue, and they're registered with the health department indicating that they wish to receive the vaccine. And the applications are phased. And at the point that they reach the phase that the applicant um, has demonstrated through the application, then they'll be contacted by email if they have email. If they don't, they'll be called by telephone. And when they're contacted, the first contact is just a reply back to with an email that says, "We've got your application." The next one is an opportunity to be vaccinated. And those are already being received by people. I've gotten a few calls today from people who said, "Hey, I got this offer to come be vaccinated at a particular place." And I said, "Well, that's it. You should go and do that." And so
Yeah.
there are several different ways that the vaccine's being distributed. One way is through the health department itself, but then also they've got partners in the community, especially hospitals, that are reaching into their patient records and they're contacting people that way. And my advice would be the first time that you get an offer of a vaccine, take it up and go get the vaccine. But I've also heard from people who have been contacted by scammers that said, "We'll be at your house at 1 o'clock to vaccinate you." Well, no one's coming to your house to vaccinate you. You're going to have to
Uh,
go to a vaccination site, whether
so
that's
if they give you a time, call the police.
that's right. And if they ask for any sort of information from you, call the
Right.
police, because there's too many opportunities for scammers to prey on people because people are concerned about getting this vaccine. But once you've registered through that online system, or if you don't have internet access, which if someone's viewing this and they've got internet access, the best way is to click that green button on the jeffcoema.org website and to register. Other than that is to call in. Now that's for residents of Jefferson County and those who work in Jefferson County. For people outside of Jefferson County, they need to contact the Alabama Department of Public Health. And that number is also on the slides that you'll be sharing. And the
Great.
reason for that, and there's a lot of questions about that, Jefferson and Mobile counties have their own health departments. They're peer organizations to the Alabama Department of Public Health. So Jefferson and Mobile counties are vaccinating their own citizens and those who work in those counties, the two counties. The other 65 counties in the state of Alabama are covered by ADPH. So it's important to go to the right place to register.
So a local county health department would be a good place to start if you live elsewhere.
Well, that's true. And you can contact your local health department if you live in another county, but I would recommend going to that Alabama
Going to that
Department of
major.
Public
Okay.
Health.
All right. Well, we will post that information. And Jim, thank you for taking a little bit of time today and sharing that with us. And you'll be on my TV program tonight, and
All right.
appreciate you doing that.
Well, please share that widely, Gary. You're welcome to share it with your colleagues in the ministry if they wish to use that. If it's helpful to them, then please share that information.
I may make this a separate video and send a link out to several pastors in that I know in different parts of the city, and just say, this might be of help to people to
Well, they're
to
welcome
know.
to it, and we want to get that information out because we want people to know how to get registered. And then, as I said, when the health department reaches their phase in the vaccination process, they'll be contacted, and that has been working very well. And in Jefferson County, the vaccine that's been administered so far, just anecdotally, the process is going very smoothly. And even one hospital that opened it up today, it was first come, first serve, and it was very orderly, and people got vaccinated quickly and were on their way. So,
Good. And you've had the shot, I understand.
I have. I've had the first of two.
And how was that first shot?
Well, it made my arm sore for about a day, and I took some Tylenol, and that did away with the soreness. My understanding is that the second vaccine dose is more likely to cause some bad feeling than more soreness or maybe some a little bit of fever, but I haven't had that one yet.
Well, those of us who are older and have had the shingles shot, the Shingrix shot has a little bit of a whammy in one of the shots, and so I'm already sort of prepared for it. That, but you know, it wasn't anything to really be deeply worried about. It was just a day or so of just feeling a little blah, but then back to normal. And
Well, maybe not schedule a tennis match the day after the second shot, and you should be all
yeah,
right. But also, the soreness, everybody across the board has said it caused soreness, and moving about helps with that soreness. So that's maybe you do need to schedule tennis the day after the
it's
first
better
shot.
than COVID, though, isn't it?
Oh, it is. There's many, many people who are very, very sick from that.
Jim, thank you for your time today and appreciate you doing this for your church family. And we'll get
Uh,
this out to other places.
Certainly. Bye bye.
Take care, my friend. And now for some final thoughts. I was thinking about all the different times that I've had through the years here in this church. And on the Wednesday nights I have left with you, I want to reflect on some lessons learned that I would call looking back to see who we have become together. I got that phrase from Mike McBrayer, who said, you know, there's a temptation when you come to an interim to go through a soul searching and who are we and all that sort of thing. And if you're not careful, it will become an exercise in navel gazing and self criticism. Uh, I hope you won't do that. I think you've got a pretty good sense of who you are. But sometimes it's interesting to reflect on who we have been and who we are becoming. And our history always tells us, not always what we have to keep doing program wise or anything like that, but it does tell us um, and give us clues to who we have been in the past. And that often tells us where our strengths are and where our capabilities are. And it's where we get the clues for where to move from here and what we are about in this church. No church can do everything for everybody. It has to make choices. And so as you go forward, maybe some reflections in days to come will be useful to you as I reflect on who we have been together. And so I wanted to start in year one when I came here, and the church had uh, basically accidentally birthed two congregations. About, um, I guess, about 300 members had left the congregation in a relatively short time as the experiment with contemporary worship didn't work. It was an effort by my predecessor to do so. It was a chaotic time in some ways, but out of all of that, the core of the church that was here when I got here had remained, and some had gone with the pastor to begin his new church, and others went with the minister of music who was here at that time. They began a church that is still here today. And all three churches have gone on to have vital ministries and long process of healing from that challenge and conflict. And um, it's always helpful when you have conflict to not make it personal. And that is to say, what has happened here? Where is there a dysfunction in the way we are doing church or the way we are doing what we do that may have created a conflict we didn't see coming? And when I got here, it was a time of where people were still a little raw from all they had been through, and were sort of tiptoeing around that. And when I came, of course, it was a great opportunity because I saw still a church sitting in a great place and great opportunities and a chance to do good ministry. But the first thing that we had to do was to say, okay, let's get clear about who you have been and how that tells you who you are going to be. And we, uh, made some decisions about the kind of worship we were about and always had been, and what we didn't do well, and to not be all things to all people. That was not going to work. But also to work for many, many years here and there on the process of forgiving ourselves for whatever had happened and forgiving one another and um, uh, understanding where things might have gone wrong and moving on. And I remember those first few years as being really wonderful. It was painful for the church. It wasn't painful for me because I wasn't here when it all happened. But for me, I had to simply be kind of stable for that time and love the church and give them room to kind of work on through. And people would have to tell stories. They'd have to talk about it and work it through. And so, with all the things that took place in a matter of time, I started hearing about it less and less. And I knew when I wasn't hearing about it anymore that we had moved on to a different place, and it was time to go forward as a church. And there was great growth in those early years. There was excitement in the church to get back on the purpose of church. And I say all of that to come back to what's happened in our country and is happening today. And this is this is bigger than what happened in our church, but I still think there's something there for us. And we have for a long time in our country been moving apart from one another and being polarized in various ways. There are lots of reasons and lots of analysis about all this, but I'm always much more interested in, so what are we going to do about it and what should we do about it? And as I think about all of that, I've had some thoughts through the years that, a community of any kind, church or a city or a town or a state, is always comprised of people who have every reason in the world not to stay together and have to really work at it to do so. The United States of America is a fantastic country. I mean, if you really think about it, we have every reason in the world not to be so angry with one another. We've got the greatest wealth in the history of humanity. We've got this beautiful land to live in. We've got the most advanced universities and technology and education and everything else. And yet here we are at each other's throats. We have some painful things in the history. We have some long-term problems that we haven't addressed adequately. But given all the positives that are there, why is it that we are in such a difficult place right now? And people, unfortunately, have different prescriptions about what we ought to do. But I certainly think there are some things that we could do. And when I hearken back to those early days in the church here, I think about a few things. I did a lot of reading about who the church had been in the past, and I called them back to that. I invited everyone to say, these are the things that were your main thing originally. And let's get back to those. Let's get back to being church. Let's get back to preaching and teaching the Bible and teaching children and fellowship with each other. And, really in the ministry, you just kind of are preaching about the same small circle of important things. A church is alive as long as it stays close to Jesus. And the more it gets off on a lot of other things and stops talking very much about Jesus, the more trouble it's going to have. Sometimes I listen to some preachers who are on podcasts and the internet, and so many of them have gotten so obsessed with the political situation now, they talk about it all the time. And you have to touch on it, but ultimately we have to, you know, be sure we bring up Jesus more than we bring up all that stuff. And it's hard. It's a challenge in this environment. But also, I think there is the sense of um, calling people back to uh, mutual obligation with one another. And you know, when I first got here too, I was struck by how many World War II veterans were here, and I was impressed with their perspective. Um, I was reflecting with our newer staff about some characters that were here, like Hack Sane, who had been on Patton's staff in the Battle of the Bulge and in Europe. Otis Brooks, previous pastor, was a medical corpsman in the Battle of the Bulge, and um, there were many others who were World War II vets and Korean War vets and Vietnam vets. Every one of those guys went through a really horrific time in the world, and they came back with an immense sense of gratitude, an immense desire to live at peace and to build things, not to tear things apart. And I think as we move through this time in our country, one of the things I am hoping for America is that we will move our gaze away from each other suspiciously and begin to find ways to find commonality. And it will take some doing. We're really isolated right now, and that's part of the problem. We've got to come back together. We've got to discover a common civic virtue. You know, one of the most striking things about that riot last week were all the different flags that people were slinging around. I saw people holding the Confederate flag, and it actually was the Stars and Bars that was a more of a flag of Reconstruction and Jim Crow than it was of the Confederacy. I saw QAnon flags. I don't know what that thing is about. I saw flags of white supremacist groups. All these flags, and people had the American flag among them. You can't have one country with many flags. You have to have one flag. And the only way you have one flag if it means the same thing to everybody that looks at it. And to me, that flag is about one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You've got to do all of those things for any of them to mean anything. And if everybody in this country does not share the same view of our flag, it's up to us to help them understand it and for us to make it a flag they can hold and love. This week, we had some friends come by our house. They immigrated here from another country, and the wife just passed her citizenship test. She had studied so hard to understand all the things that being a citizen is about. It made me wonder how many of us could pass a citizenship test, what it means to be an American. What we have today are 20 different flags and 500 different definitions of what it means to be a good citizen. And therein may be part of the problem. And one of the things that we are going to have to talk about is, what does this country mean in a way that is open enough for everyone to grasp and say, I am part of that. Somehow, if we get on that journey, maybe we can begin to solve some of the pain that is between us. As far as people that broke the law, people that destroyed things, all during this past year, lots of violence, destruction of property, and then this horrible violation of the Capitol. You got to face the justice. There are groups that want to destroy our country, and they have to be dealt with in a different way through the courts, the laws, the criminal justice system. But where the attitude problem is the issue, there's work we can do something about. And so I leave that with you tonight and invite you to pray for our country, pray for our leaders, pray for one another, and pray for a rebirth of a better sense of American citizenship. Thank you.
Good evening, VHBC. Just come to you with a brief update tonight. We're glad to not have any of our members in the hospital. Our folks who were in last week have made their way home and are continue to be recovering. So, of course, we want to remember them. We did get word this week that Prissy Sumners lost her father-in-law, Clyde Sumners. So be sure and remember the Sumners family as you pray. On the top of our minds is the recent, the announcement of Dr. Furr's retirement. And of course, we celebrate with he and Vicky. At the same time, we're at this transition point in our church. We're confident that God has good ahead for us, but we know that there'll be plenty of questions and things that are around the corner. A week from tonight, the 20th of January, is our scheduled quarterly business meeting. So you're going to want to be you're going to want to be sure and be a part of that. That will happen through Zoom, and we'll send you a link next week that will give you access to the business meeting. So that's next Wednesday evening at 6:30. We'll get a report from our personnel committee related to Gary's retirement, and also from our COVID response team about current conditions. You remember that we're not having activities in the building right now, desperately wanting to do so, but hoping and praying that we are able to turn that corner real soon. So we'll have some updates a week from tonight at the business meeting, and do just other our regular business. Hear some reports from our Child Development Center and other staff. So I hope you'll tune into that. And that's it for tonight. So I hope you all stay warm and have a good evening until I see you again, either via Zoom or perhaps even in person.